Shidduchim podcast.
Yes, this is indeed the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast. Love being able to do this.
It's fun.
Episode 36, The Role of Gender Roles. I'm Chani, here with my man, the man, Sir Yona.
Hello.
And the boss, IJ.
Hey, yes. Welcome, guys. Thanks for having me. Am I a guest this episode?
A most revered guest.
I'm looking forward. It's going to be a cool episode. We got a lot of professionals on this topic. Gender roles, very controversial. And hopefully we can have an emistica conversation.
That is the goal.
Absolutely. So, the role of gender roles, part 1. In this episode, we will be dividing up our time. We will not be the main characters in this podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
No, we will not be. We will be interviewing some special guests, divided up amongst our trusty crew members here. Yona and I will be interviewing our first guest. IJ will be interviewing our second guest. Both males. This episode will be the male take on the role of gender roles. Stay tuned for part 2 on the role of gender roles with the female perspective.
Okay, so let's get right to it. So as Chani mentioned, we are not going to be taking too much time to ourselves on this episode. I think we should each give a 1-minute explanation of our views on the matter of gender roles. Do we believe in them? How much do we believe in them? IJ, what do you think about gender roles?
Yeah, so here's my my take on this. All right, I'm convinced that we are lacking in the area of gender roles. Okay, we need to get a bit more clear here. I'm not going to spend 45 minutes on explaining my opinion. We got these professionals coming on who know how to get into the nuances and discussion on that. I do think that singles are in a major conundrum here. Women are breaking the glass ceilings in work, at home, their hobbies. They're independent. And guys are struggling in a world that is telling them that being a macho male, successful, and having a life together, all this has to be done by when you're 22. And that's absolutely absurd. So that's, I think, a little bit of the parenthetical context. But here we're discussing the gender roles while you're dating, when you're out with the person, and all of a sudden, guys tend to see women trying to jump in on what's quote-unquote the man's turf. Or on the other side of it, women are seeing guys jump in on what is the women's turf. So women want to be involved in halacha. They want to be involved in finances. They want to live in their own neighborhoods. They handle all the Shabbos vacation plans. Before you know it, like, what's left for the guy? All right, the guy wants to be involved in all these other things, Shabbos table, what the kids dress, etc., etc. Things are just coming up that guys are noticing, girls are noticing. We're getting this feedback directly from our audience, from people who are dating, and this makes both parties feel extremely perfidious. So now, obviously, I am being a little bit over dramatic, maybe in some of this, but look, Bichlal, people are actually feeling this way. So fortunately, we have Torah and psychotherapeutic or something assistance to give us for this episode, give us that guidance and assistance for this episode. So, we're able to dulcify this version of gender roles and explain them more, and, for myself, I'll just leave you with the following. Don't let it break the Shidduch. If you are a woman, you want to understand the halachic expectations, or you want more halachic involvement. He has a rebbe, he has a mentor. You'll be able to break in there. So you don't let that break the Shidduch, right? I understand you want to pontificate on this topic and that topic, and you'll be able to get there at a certain point. But people are just, I think, bringing this up too early in the relationship and crossing it out, saying, this person is not for me, sayonara. And now what do we have? We have everyone just staying single and miserable. Okay, so let's just realize that these things can come off in a wrong way, all right? And by the way, just like the guys might want to bring up other things, okay, like I mentioned. So that's a bit of my opening. You want to take it away?
Okay, perfect. And we're not going to have a back and forth here. We're not going to, we're not going to discuss the matter further. Let's move to Chani. Chani, what do you think about gender roles?
I don't even need a minute. All I have to say is I think gender roles are as relevant as they are significant to the people involved in any relationship, meaning that if it makes sense for people to adopt traditional gender roles, and we'll get into what that means, if that's what they want to do, if that's what makes sense for them, go for it. And if they don't want to do that and it doesn't make sense for them and they wouldn't be being true to themselves by going along with tradition, dump tradition, do something different, be you, do your own thing. Don't live by the rules just because everyone else says you have to.
All right, well said. I basically agree with that approach. I do agree that, yes, it's very important to make sure that the gender roles do not become absolute, that everybody has to adhere to these gender roles that society has set for us. That being said, I do think that, first of all, there is a natural element to gender roles. I think that men and women are, in general, or in gender role, inclined towards different things. There are exceptions, of course. I think there are male traits and female traits. We'll get into that. But I think that everybody, for the most part, there will be a division between the men and the women. And I don't think that we should be specifically looking to throw away the gender roles. The attitude should be you do what's right for your family, for yourself. And if you happen to fit into the gender norms, own it, embrace it. If you don't happen to fit into the gender norms, well, ain't nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. Everyone's got their own individual traits, and you just got to own who you are. But as I said, this episode is not about any of us. This is about our guests. So we're going to move on to our very first guest after this short break.
This episode is sponsored by Chicago Chesed Fund in honor of the Shabbos for Shidduchim campaign. The initiative gives singles, their friends, or family members a meaningful way to bring about Shidduchim. On Tu B'Shvat, the 28th of January, hundreds of Loimdim will complete Shas in 24 hours in the Chus of Klal Yisrael's Shidduchim. By sponsoring a daf for $100 on behalf of a single, you can help harness the immense kedusha and power of Limud HaTorah in their zechus. To sponsor a daf, go to shas4shidduchim.org. That's shas4shidduchim.org. Each sponsorship allows you to submit 5 Tehillim names with a special coupon NTS. Use that at shas4shidduchim.org to submit an extra name. All proceeds go directly to Chicago Chesed Fund and their many programs and services that help with Shidduch challenges and bring singles closer to their sivukim. To learn more about Shas for Shidduchim and to sponsor a daf in the zechus of a single, visit shas4shidduchim.org or call 847-679-7799, extension 170. That's 847-679-7799, extension 170.
All right, guys, Chani and I have the special privilege of interviewing our next guest, who I am proud to call a personal friend. Rabbi Yehoshua Eisenberg. He's a deep thinker. He's a Talmud Chacham. He recently actually started his own podcast, which is cleverly called The Database, spelled B-E-I-S, like Beis Medrash, which is awesome. And by the way, I listen to that regularly and highly recommend it. One of the things I love about Rabbi Eisenberg's approach is that he has a particular knack for connecting all the moving parts of the Torah and Chazal to each other in a way that makes it fit seamlessly together with each other. And then he ties it beautifully into, just daily living, our daily lives in a very practical manner. So that's why I thought it would be, he would be the perfect person to discuss tonight's topic, which is pretty sensitive for some people. This topic is, people are very heated about this one. So without further ado, Rabbi Yehoshua Eisenberg, welcome to the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast.
Thank you so much, Yona. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to call you a personal friend. I'm honored and looking forward to having a conversation.
Thank you, kind sir, as are we. Chani, you want to introduce what the topic is, what we're going to be starting with here?
Sure. So, as was mentioned previously to our audience, but we'll repeat it for you, Rabbi Eisenberg, tonight we're going to be discussing gender roles. Specifically, we would like to analyze whether they're outdated and arbitrary or, if there's really something to them that merits keeping them around. So before we really get into the specific halachic and hashkafic nuances of gender roles as they are based in the Torah, more broadly speaking, what are your thoughts on the matter in general? Do you think there's any merit to keeping them around?
So I think we have to get a little bit more specific about what we mean by gender roles, but certainly there are, assumed precedences in terms of what the role of a man in a relationship is and what the role of a woman is in a relationship. And obviously some of those are indispensable. Like obviously there are clear biological differences between a man and a woman. And for that reason, there might just be natural roles that are going to be different between the two. But when it comes to, I guess, halacha and hashkafa, there are obviously nuances where it might be a little bit more, I guess, as you mentioned, Yona, sensitive. But again, there are I'm sure there are different areas where it's not so black on white, where again you'll have room for debate. But I guess if we can get a little bit more specific about what we mean when we say gender roles, I'd love to advance the conversation further.
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that when we discuss gender roles, it's things like, a man should be the one who's providing for his family. A woman should be in the kitchen. A man should be directing the sort of halachic and ruchnius aspects of daily life, which actually that's the one thing that I'm personally, I'm not 100% sure on, even though I'm pretty sure I have an idea. I'll just tell you at first my thoughts on this, and then, Chani can say hers. We're pretty similar in this matter. But my feeling on the subject is that you can't be rigid in terms of enforcing gender roles. I don't think that there is necessarily, for the most part, a right way and a wrong way on any specific issue. But as you mentioned, I do believe that there are certain biological factors that men and women are just different. We're built differently, we view the world differently, and we have different interests. And unfortunately, I feel like in society today, there's this movement to sort of deny those realities, to deny the existence of this sort of intrinsic biological way of doing things when you're a man, and another one when you're a woman. I think that it's important to acknowledge that these things exist and to not try to quash them. It's a beautiful thing, that men and women are different. We complement each other in many different ways. And I think that it's important to embrace those realities. Now, at the same time, every couple is going to be different. Every individual is going to be different. And we all have a bit of the typically masculine and we all have a bit of the typically feminine in us. So whereas, most men will have a majority of masculine, what's considered by society at large to be masculine traits, and most women will have a majority of the more feminine traits, there's overlap, and it's going to vary based on the couple and based on their situation. So I think that the man tends to be the one who's the breadwinner, and the woman tends to be the one who's tending to the matters of the house on a biological level? Do I believe that there's a natural draw for that? Absolutely, I do. But I don't think that these are rules. I don't think they're things that need to be enforced. I think they're just realities. And sometimes those realities don't exactly line up. And sometimes it's not going to be the case. And you shouldn't be stuck rigidly to these different roles. Chani, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that forcing somebody to stick with a specific set of tasks, if you want to call it that, just because that's what most people who are male or female are good at, is not always wise, because not everybody has every single aspect of what is typical for their gender. And I feel like a lot of the more, I don't know if you want to call them gray or just arbitrary gender role tasks, in today's day and age, it's kind of become a teamwork thing. Just to give an example, something like home decor, if you're redoing any part of your house. Some might say that that's more of a woman's job because, aesthetically that tends to be a feminine strong point. But at the same time, there are some relationships where the man is the one who either cares more about aesthetics or just has a better eye for it. But in many situations, it really becomes a team effort. So the lines really get blurred. So we'd love to hear what some of the Torah perspectives are.
Okay, so both of you already have given me a lot of material to work with, and I don't even know if I need to say anything controversial anymore because Yona already mentioned the woman should be in the kitchen.
Oh, we don't shy away from controversy here.
Bring it on.
Okay, so obviously there is nothing wrong with a man who wants to cook. I mean, I don't know how to cook, but I know plenty of men who do know how to cook. And a couple weeks ago, as Parsha Yaakov Avinu, he cooks a stew. So if you want a precedent for a man cooking, you do have that. So there are, I would say, a lot of, I guess, phantom gender roles that are more or less arbitrary. And a lot of those things, a person certainly should not be rigid when it comes to those kinds of things. But again, there are obvious differences between men and women, and I do think that in the world we are in now, the lines do tend to be blurred where they should not. Right, so I would say that it works both ways. I think there are people who tend to be rigid in areas where they absolutely should not be, and then there are people who are blurring the lines and almost switching roles where the roles should absolutely not be switched. So I think you have a little bit of both. Now, in terms of some of the other things that were mentioned, like the woman's role being, in terms of making the home, right? So we do have a basis for this, just in Chazal's vernacular. So, for example, the Aramaic word for a woman or for a wife, really, is bitziu, which it's related to the word bias. It's related to the word home.
Oh, wow. Fascinating.
Yeah, and so the Aramaic word for woman is really it's house, and there's something to be said about the woman's role in the home. Now, in terms of a man being the breadwinner, so you are absolutely right that there is certainly a precedent for that. It says in Chumash and Bereshis, "B'zeyas apecha tochal lechem." This is exactly what Hashem prescribes for Adam Harishon after eating from the Eitz Hadas, that He says that man is going to work, and yet we see in other circles. It's very frequent that a woman will be the breadwinner, and the man will have an almost solely ruchniistic approach to the marriage, where he's learning, or his parnassa, if he's in chinuch, or if he's in kollel. So it's his parnassa is really on the side. So and I think that's a perfect example of. For different couples, different things work, and there are certain areas where it's really not worth it to be so rigid. I actually recall that on one of my rabbinic training courses that I took over the past few years. So one of the speakers, I don't want to divulge his name, but I'll say that he happens to be very tightly right wing, and he. There was a Q&A session, and one of the questions that came to him, for this class of young rabbis was if a rabbi was going to be offered a position in a shul that absolutely is bent on having a woman as the shul president. And this really right-wing rabbi, a Agudas Yisrael, in wing, he said, you choose your battles. And that, in other words, it's not that there isn't what to be said about, let's say, a woman in that kind of a role in the spiritual world, but again, choose your battles. Maybe this is not one of the battles where it's actually worth that much of the fight. So I just bring that example in just to see that construct of, is it the best ideal? Not necessarily, but I wouldn't, throw away a shul offer job necessarily on that basis alone.
Right. So what would you say, when we're venturing into that topic, on the topic of women, leading spiritual sort of positions or taking those kinds of leadership roles, whether it's in the shul or in the house or in the community. What is the Torah perspective on that? What is Chazal's perspective on that? What should our approach be to those sorts of things?
So what I would say is this is where we return to that broader umbrella of the question of the role, right? So one of the big factors about the role of women, for example, in terms of leadership positions, a big question, comes back to the the infamous topic of tznius. Right, I only say infamous because of how by many it might be received, but tznius is not a small matter. Now, obviously, tznius exists for both men and for women. There's a degree of modesty that's required of both, and tznius is not just about how you dress, but it's also about how you carry yourself. It's about how you act.
Right.
But the Vilna Gaon goes very far. The Vilna Gaon, he didn't play around. He wasn't cutesy. The Vilna Gaon would say that the equivalent of for women of the man's obligation of Talmud Torah for a woman is tznius. That's how high he put that on the pedestal. Meaning where perhaps the most important mitzvah for a man is Talmud Torah, the most important for a woman is tznius. So we all have to daven, we all have to do chesed. Now women don't have the same level of requirement of Torah learning. So in that vein, says the Vilna Gaon, where I put Torah for a man, I put tznius for a woman, which is very telling about the role of women, again, from that hashkafic perspective. Now, I would say that there are certain there's certain areas where it's it's close to pretty black on white in terms of what should be done in a certain situation. So, for example, I think in general, a woman should be given opportunities if she wants to daven, if she wants to go to shul, and even if she wants to learn. There's nothing wrong with a woman who wants to learn Torah. But then when we talk about the priorities, so if it's going to be the man who stays home with the kids or the woman who stays home with the kids and only one of them can daven with a minyan, it's pretty clear in halacha that the man should be able to go to shul and daven with a minyan. And this is not because of it's not because we have a disparaging view chas v'shalom of woman, but it's because a woman has a particular role in the home. And the man's level of obligation in other areas is even greater. If a woman wants to volunteer, extra obligations, that's amazing if it works out for the family. And similarly for the man, if the man wants to have extra obligations in his community, so obviously that's something he has to discuss with his wife. But the first step is to look at what does halacha say about a certain area, and then work your way down from there. So in terms of a woman in a leadership role, so again, I would say certainly, what I was taught in terms of choosing your battles. But what's the ideal? So anything that puts a woman front and center naturally is compromising of that top value of the woman, which is tznius, and so that's something that absolutely has to be considered. Now, obviously, there are women who are in chinuch, and certainly in the area of Benos Yisrael. So certainly, it makes much more sense in my mind for a woman to be mechanech young girls, and for women to be involved in women's events. Whether it's a challah or whether it's, even just giving lectures. If a Rebbitzin going to be giving lectures to the women, so that, that obviously naturally makes more sense. Mm-hmm. Now, is there a place ever for a woman speaking before men? Again, I would say choose your battles, but there's the ideal, and then there's the area of how rigid should we absolutely be in this area? And that might depend on the community, and that might depend on the culture. And again, a lot of these things which, just develop over time, it's clear that the place that we are at now is not quite where we were generations ago, but there are certain things that we don't throw away.
For sure. Absolutely. What would you say to people who sort of will take concepts in Judaism and use those concepts to paint Judaism as sexist? To say, oh, you see, those Orthodox Jews, they're so sexist. It's all about the men and the patriarchy and, all of that. What would you say about that? For example, something like the bracha of Shelo Asani Isha. People immediately, they take that and it's like, okay, Judaism hates women. What would you respond to that?
Okay, so it's an excellent question, and actually reminds me of a great story. my younger brother, Rav Mendy, who you know well.
Oh, yes.
He
man.
so when we shared positions as advisors for NCSY, he was trying to get attention from the NCSYers, and so he wanted to spark a great conversation about just this very topic. And so immediately, he asked the high schoolers, so who here thinks the Torah is sexist? And then he had all of their attention. They were all ready to hear what he had to say about it, and they were all very sure that the Torah was sexist. And this might be a different conversation than a conversation about gender role. This might be a conversation more about having a conversation with people about gender roles. So if the person comes to you saying the Torah is sexist, it could be it's not worth the conversation. But if the person comes to you and they're asking, like, I really am trying to understand these precedences in the Torah, I'm trying to understand the let's say the Haredi society, or I'm trying to understand Orthodox norms, and how can I look at it and assume that it's not sexist? So if there's a person with intellectual honesty who's looking for the truth about these things, so I think you have to take each thing step by step. So let's say, Shlo Asani Isha is a good example, because that one just sounds like we are saying that there's this almost this objective statement that it's better not to be a woman. Right, and we put this next to not being a goy, and we put this next to not being an eved, right? So in the brachos that we say in the morning, and the classic answer that's given, some people think of it as apologetic, but it's really the pashut pshat explanation of those brachos, is that it has to do with hierarchy in terms of mitzvah obligations. So we prefer to have more mitzvos in general, and there's something, that's just one of those things that women don't have as many mitzvos, and that could be seen as an advantage, that could be seen as a disadvantage, and you could take it for what you want. I don't hear any women complaining that they don't get to do bris milah. But in all seriousness, the truth of the matter is that society has certainly changed. And I'm not saying that the text of our brachos should change, but just to understand where things came from a long time ago, it was, and many will argue today, it is still very hard to be a woman in society. And there is something for men to be thankful for. If you want to call this male privilege, I'm sure a lot of people today would like that term. And there, to a certain degree, it exists. And it certainly, I think it existed more back then than it does now. That it's harder. You're safer to be a man in society. But certainly, if you look at it in conjunction with the other brachos, in terms of Shelo Asani Goy, which many people would say is also not politically correct. What's wrong with being a non-Jew? And the answer is, if that's how Hashem created you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we see a certain advantage, a certain bracha that comes with being a Yid, and certainly not being an Eved. And it's interesting because, again, a Goy has certain obligations in this world to serve God, and an Eved happens to have more obligations, and a woman even more than that. But what it comes down to is, I think that the big question of, is the Torah sexist? I think this is a question that's often asked when we look at many mitzvos that men get to do and that women don't get to do. And a lot of it comes back down to this question of just what was the role that Hashem had in mind when he created women. And so, very famously, women are not obligated in a mitzvah seishes man grama. And there's a lot of, hashkafa behind that. So a mitzvah seishes man grama is, I'm sure most of our listeners will know, is a mitzvah that's time-bound. So I've heard a lot of hashkafa connected to this, in that when it comes to a woman, so we've all heard that women are naturally closer to Hashem. And this is not an apologetic by any means. This is absolutely the truth. Women have a natural, closer, I guess, spiritual energy to God. Their spirituality shines much brighter. And what's interesting about it is that connecting to tznius, connecting to the certain innocence that Yiddishkeit wants of a woman. So that really requires that a woman stay up on her pedestal, that a woman already is on this really high pedestal. Now, for a man, the biggest obligation for a man is character refinement, constantly growing and adding on to make himself into a better person. Now, obviously, this is something that a woman has to do too. But right, this is something that I think you alluded to earlier, Yona, that there are certain masculine features that even women can relate to, and vice versa, feminine that men can relate to. So both men and women have to work on character refinements. But for man, the real spiritual battle is the climb up, whereas for a woman, the spiritual battle is you're already up there, do not fall. And for this reason, hashkafically, time is really the greatest enemy of woman. Because the longer she spends in this world, the more she has that challenge of stay up there. Whereas for men, the more time, the better. The more time I have to climb up, I can constantly get better. So for a woman, she's already on that pedestal. So mitzvah seishes man grama, we don't preoccupy her with things that are going to take her time. We try to leave her to the other responsibilities that she has to do in terms of setting the tone and being that beacon for man, to be the Ezer Kenegdo for man, to be the one who inspires man.
Wow, that's beautiful. I actually related to the Shelo Asani Isha, so there's the flip side. There's what women say, which is Shasani Kirtono, and I've heard that, described as thanking Hashem for creating me according to his will, which I've heard something along the lines of, you've created me already in a closer state to perfection than you created the man. You've created me already as someone who is aligned with your will in a way that men are not. And I think that ties into what you were just saying beautifully.
I appreciate it, and I think this is important because, again, people are very sensitive about this issue, and people have to recognize the Torah's value. And just from a halachic standpoint, my Rebbe Rav Yonasan Sachs, he's very prolific, and he has in a couple of his Sfarim actually he quotes the Klei Chemda, who talks about just the difference between fatherhood and motherhood in terms of determining who is a firstborn. And so he says that when it comes to the nachala, right, the spiritual inheritance and the physical inheritance, so that follows fatherhood. And says fatherhood, the firstborn is determined not at the time of birth, but at the time of conception, at the time of Yetzirah. And that happens when the man literally, he gives over to the woman, and the woman it conceives. But when it comes to the spiritual identity, the kedusha of Bechor, so that follows motherhood. So, for example, the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, that follows when the child is born. Motherhood starts at birth. Fatherhood starts at conception. Motherhood starts at birth. And the idea of kedushas Yisrael, that comes from the mother. Right, you're determined if you're a Jew if you're born from the woman, whereas all the other inheritance, all the things, for example, many people wonder why it is that when it comes to halacha, right, what's the halacha, the minhag of the family? Usually it follows the man. So again, the way that I've heard it put very beautifully, the Rav would quote the pasuk of Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titosh torasi mecha. So musar avicha, that refers to the hard halachic aspects. In fact, I think there's a relationship between the word musar and mesora. Mesora follows the father, right? The father has the Rebbe. The father goes to the Rebbe to get his eitzah. So the father obviously leads the Torah discussion in the house. Then what's torasi mecha? Torasi mecha represents that finer ambiance, that tone that is set, that Shabbos table, the midos of the family. That tone is set by the mother, right? There were times where Avraham and Yitzchak, for example, they were the one they would pass down the Mesorah from generation to generation, but often their wives had a bina yisera, an intuition that they knew better, and Hashem said, actually listen to them. So the point is that it's not just it's not a matter of men versus women in terms of one better than the other. But you need the Musar Avicha and the Torasi Mecha. You need them both. And there's something that each one contributes to that marriage. And it would be tragic for us, as Yona said, to blur the lines between the two in areas where we absolutely need those roles intact. But otherwise, again, I would say where it is arbitrary, then definitely don't be rigid.
So, Rabbi, where can our listeners find you to hear more pearls of wisdom on a weekly basis?
So it's very simple on jewishpodcasts.org and really all the major platforms for listening to podcasts, whether it's Spotify, iTunes. You could find me on The Data Base with Rav Yeshua Eisenberg. So that's The Data, and then Base, as Yona put so nicely, Base is BEIS. And you can reach out to me at thedatabase@gmail.com if you wanna discuss the matter further. But anyway, I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts on this matter.
Rabbi Eisenberg, always a pleasure. This was fascinating. As always, I'm not surprised, but for those of our listeners who have never heard you before, I'm sure this will not be the last time they hear you. Thank you so much for joining the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast, and wishing you a wonderful, wonderful night.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Yona from the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast. Did you like our new jingle? Well, thank you. I wrote and sang it, but my vision would never have been realized without my talented buddy, Hillel Kapnick. At Uptop Recording Studios in Muncie, Hillel takes your musical dreams and transforms them into reality. I can personally attest to his talent and general awesomeness. Hillel is available for song production, musical arrangements, vocal recording, mixing, mastering, and more. He's also a DJ and a one-man band, so no matter what your musical needs are, Hillel is your man. For more information, check out his website at hillelcaps.com. That's HILLELKAPS.com. And follow him on Facebook and Instagram. All right, now let's move over to a very special interview between our very own founder and ruler, IJ, and a special guest. IJ, who do we have the pleasure of hearing from today?
Coach Benson, who is here, a life coach, right?
Yeah.
Shidduch coach, other things.
Yeah.
You are still in Shidduchim, yes?
Correct.
We got someone who's in the trenches with us here. That's how we do it. So it's important for both parties, as I said before, when they're dating, to understand, their roles, being very unpolitically correct here. You have the men working and the women at home. Obviously, that's not how it is today. Okay. We have women who are working, have careers. We have men who are home taking care of the kids. And beyond that is a real dynamic integration between both parties to run the household together, run chores together, halacha, all these aspects of building a bias. And what we have now is very different times. While that is old times, it's good to stick to old times as well. This is very important. Do not let the modern day get to you. Torah never changed. Torah values don't change. The Torah never changes. But society does change. And that means that our challenges, the Yetzer Hara, etc., the gullus changes. For now, we have to figure out what else are we being tested on, what else to work on. So whether the man is cooking or the woman is bringing home the kosher bacon, we all want to say 100% it's okay, whatever works. But there is this other side that is thinking, well, maybe it might not be the best thing.
First, thank you for having me on. What an intro.
You're welcome. Audience?
So, before I answer that question directly, I would just give a big caveat that these challenges, these confusions, I think are not as relevant as we may think they would be. And the reason for that is because I think in terms of dating, physical attraction, chemistry, and emotional connection, core values and goals. If that's in place, that's pretty much all you need. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing, just in terms of the actual question, I do think that gender roles do matter. I also think that there's a lot of flexibility. And I really goes down to, let's say people have a disagreement about hashkafa. So what happens is if you have a loving, healthy, good relationship, people make accommodations. And that's why I was saying before that really, as long as the core of the relationship is solid, a lot of these differences, and I think a man's role should be this, I think a woman's role should be that, it kind of melts away a bit into, I respect whatever boundaries you set up for yourself. So you know what? You want to have this space for yourself? I respect that.
Women, are you taking notes? Avery, are you taking notes?
Well, this thing goes both ways. It's like get out of the kitchen. It could be like that as well. So that's why I'm hesitant to make strong statements about this, because to me it barely matters as if the core is in place, because then you can have a discussion about it and then you're able to
for sure.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it in this context. We're gonna have several therapists on and coaches and for this episode. But we're only discussing this in a Shidduch perspective. While you're dating, that could be an issue. Now, let's say you do have a couple who are seeing each other right now, and there is a issue, hashkafically speaking. Is that something for the man, or is that something for the woman? There are women today who want a major say and involvement in that. Now, that is an amazing thing, but practically speaking, the man needs to be the man.
I believe that boundaries are only made once they're violated. So what I mean by that is you don't say like, give me my space until someone like steps into your space. So
yeah, right. I love the way you phrase that. And I'm saying this from a guy who's learning in yeshiva, or he's working now, he's learned, and he has not had this interaction ever with a woman, with a girl before. And all of a sudden, the girl's jumping in and trying to, no. What about my halachic opinions? What about my halachic? What about this? And the guy's like, whoa, wait a second. Wait a second. This is my area. Like, just, is it better for them to go along with it and then get to it? Or is it better to discuss it and bring everything and get through it now?
I think this is an important conversation. If the relationship is solid enough, I think gender roles is a topic not only for this podcast. If it comes up and they feel boundaries being violated in terms of what they consider their role to be, then that's a discussion. Then that you bring it up and you say, what do you consider the role to be? Where are my zones? And I think this is really what it comes down to is, instead of getting to the semantics and the stereotypes of where men and women would fall, I would put it in these terms, is that you want your home eventually, you're dating generally to get married. You want your home to be a place where everyone's strengths are being fully optimized and being efficient. So forget about men versus women, but if the guy in the relationship is very strong and powerful, it makes sense that he should be the one to be more of like the physical protector of the home. That makes sense. If the woman is more adept at multitasking and, nuance and emotional connections, if she has that power that is more than the man in those areas, and it makes sense to have tasks that correspond to that. So to me, it's not about getting like men are this and women are that. As I think it really depends on each individual where the strengths lie.
Yes.
So the strength is really based on the individual. So once you locate and identify each person's strengths, don't worry about how society wants. If the guy is really good at cooking, I don't see the problem with the guy cooking. But then there has to be something where there's a balance of spheres of dominance, meaning there are specific areas that I see that you need to compensate and give. There needs to be some type of balance that the two people in the relationship each feel they have areas where they are the go-to for this area. And as long as they each have that, I think there can be some crossing over if that is a strength. Having said that, I do think it also matters where it's coming from. If it's coming from a place where, we could all be the same and etc., I don't think that's good. I think you should be loyal to your strengths. If the energy is coming from a place of deficit and instability and insecurity, first address the insecurities and then we could have the conversation. But if it's coming from a position of strength and it is a real strength of yours, then I personally don't see the problem as long as that conversation is had and then there is a balance of spheres of dominance within the relationship.
I really like what you said right there. Those spheres of balance, and I think that's a very awakening thought right there. It has literally nothing to do with the gender roles, okay? It's nothing, he's the man, he does this, the woman does that, she does that. And it's nothing to do with that. You're building a relationship, and you're both coming in with, 50% and 50%. Or as I joke on this podcast many times, 100%, 100%. Or as the single guys expect, 10% and she does 90%. But anyway, wait, let's get a laugh there. Okay, no one was laughing. But that's a phenomenal point right there. Very eye-opening. But with that said, in a relationship, especially in Shidduchim, you have a general code that you're going by, okay? And that is that the guy has to feel like He's fulfilling a lot of those male roles, and the woman is going to be coming in and bringing in those roles. People have a real issue with taking a step back and letting that party do their thing.
So I totally get that, and I do agree that the lines have been blurred. I think purposefully so, not by the individual, but by certain cultural forces, that they're looking to see that on a broad scale that gender doesn't matter, roles don't matter, and that's not true. And if that's the place where the person is coming from, then honestly I don't even think that's someone. I mean, unless you're the same way, then you're meant for each other. But if you're not that way, I don't suggest going in that direction, because the chances are there are many other aspects that the relationship won't be respected.
And if that is the case, where they're total opposites, and I know couples like this, right? The woman is the girl is out working, and the guy is actually home with the kids. He's the cooker, he's the cleaner. That's fine. If that is actually the dynamic of that relationship, amazing. Kudos, we're at peace. But in this case, we're literally examining the fact that singles in Shidduchim, they can't get past the 3, 4, 5, 10, 6, 7 dates, right? They're having issues getting past those post first stage dates, and people feel like they're imposing on their territory. They're imposing on the territory. Okay, so how's the Shabbos table going to look? Well, what Shabbos tablecloth are you looking? All of a sudden, you're questioning as a guy. That's the wrong thing, because that's her aspect of it. But yet, our goals have to align. Our lives have to align. And where is
Alignment?
Alignment. Where's the common ground? Where do you kind of cave in on some?
Again, once the relationship is secure and solid and it's healthy and it's working and there's chemistry, everything can be negotiated to a place where we could, I'm good at this, you're good at that. And even if it doesn't fit perfectly into the exact gender role stereotypes, that's fine. The one thing I'd want to just come back to that you mentioned before was when they start like going into the territory, like the, let's say 3rd, 4th date, and she's like, and the girl's like leveling the guy with halacha stuff. Like, oh, did you know this and that? So to me, that's less about gender roles, so to speak, because again, everything can be negotiated later, but there's something just even social appropriateness. I think so. I think it's not even like all these things could be worked out and talked about.
But I have to know the halachas of my husband.
Right. So that's not right. So that if it's coming from that place where it's like, I need to know, I need to tell you, I need to make sure, or I don't trust you, which is a big thing. I don't trust you to know the halacha, or I don't think you're taking the halacha seriously enough. If it's coming from that place, again, that's stay away.
And I would point out two aspects with that response that you're getting. The first thing is that, like you just mentioned, trust factor. Now, you do have to trust that person. That's important. And then the second aspect of it is try to understand that this guy has not been questioned or might not have been questioned like that in the past. He's not ready to open up and discuss all his halachic understanding, what he's machmir with, what he's not machmir with. You, as a girl, should be looking for a husband, how his midos are. Is he kind to you? Will he make a good father? Not a chavrusa. Now, again, with that said, I will say that there doesn't mean to compromise on your values here. Not at all. But give it a chance, because the rest will come through. And that's the most important thing.
I think some confusion here can be rooted in that many people who have, let's say, did not grow up with this high level of kavod Torah, kavod of Rabbanim, and specific, I would say, more right-wing views, that now they've embraced them, and I think there's a certain rejection of like the other side, or how they were raised, or something of that sort. And now they're in a place where they need to kind of test him, when really this test and this validation is not necessary, and can be negotiated at a more advanced stage of the Shidduch process when it is more appropriate. And then again, you focus on the strengths and just be very aware of where it's coming from for you. The ability to engage in conflict or in the dispute in a healthy way, to me, that's being a much better test to give to, not to like purposefully start a problem, but if you're noticing that everyone's like, you say a problem, oh, I agree. To me, that would be like, wait a second, see what level of comfort can you have having different opinions about things. Is that a crisis? or is it considered to be something that can't be tolerated? And I think, again, if any of these problems come up and it can't be talked about in a even-handed way where one side's not getting super triggered, etc., if those lines of communication aren't open, to me, that's the red flag. Not whether or not he knows halacha or whether he's going into the kitchen and what's he doing in the kitchen. I don't know. Does a ben Torah belong in the kitchen? So, or does the guy know halacha? He doesn't know enough halacha. So to me, the red flag is more the inability to engage about it rather than the content itself.
Well, not every single wants to make that commitment, hence why they're single. There, I said it, people. And you have to really figure out, what are actually some situations that it's fair for the girl or the guy to jump up and say, whoa, I didn't know this was, this. If I knew this, I don't know if I would have, gone further with you in the relationship.
You could choose as many values as you want, and you'd say that make as many things that are, this is a red flag, this is too much for me, etc. But realize when you do that, the chances of you finding someone that's going to meet all that criteria goes drastically lower. It really comes down to what we started with, which is common values, common goals, chemistry, and physical attraction. If that's there, everything else can be worked out, negotiated, talked out,
it's
communication. It's Hashem. And so everything else you're adding more to that is really in many ways diluting the priorities. You can only have so many priorities. It's best to prioritize the character and all these things that we're just describing.
The goal here is to get married on, like you said, Coach Benson. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel there's a little chemistry? Do you feel like this person's mitos? You bring out the best in this person's mitos, because that's really the best way to put it. Here, everyone, this is the takeaway. This is going to be the clip on the Instagram right here. It's not whether this person has mitos or not. Everyone has mitos. We know the biggest crooks, they got the best mitos. We know the best guys with the best mitos, they're very shy, it might not come out. Is that person's mitos amplified when they're around you? Are your mitos amplified when you're around them? That's the difference. That's how you know this is something I should go into. Should be a serious relationship. We so appreciate you coming on, Coach Benson. Coach Benson, if people are interested in inquiring further, where can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. So you could find me at coachbensonfox.com. Please go there. I have a group with 450 Jewish men. So it's called Jewish Men for Joy, Balance, and Growth. So that we have it on Facebook. But
oh, cool. I think I heard of that.
Yeah. And you can always email me at results@coachbensonfox.com.
Awesome. Excellent.
That was awesome and excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, Coach Benson. And thank you, IJ, for an awesome interview. Guys, stick around for part 2, which is going to be coming out soon. It's going to be exciting. This is going to be the female take on this very same issue. IJ, why don't you end us off here?
Well, thank you for joining us for another controversial, amazing, spectacular episode. As I usually end off, happy face, smiley face, silly face. This is the Nobody Talks Shidduch podcast.
Nobody talks Shidduchim.
Alchi's Media Network.